Kristen with Simply a Steward, and I'm back today with a homeschool video. Today I'm going to be talking to you about what we have in our morning basket. Now we have a fourth grader, a second grader, a kindergartner, and also my 3-year-old who kind of likes to tag along. She's not formally doing anything, but she does usually sit with us during our morning circle time. This is the first thing we do every day, so I do it so she can be included. Often she kind of participates, or sometimes she just kind of sits on my lap and snuggles with me, but it gives me the opportunity to spend time with her before I have to start working individually with the rest of my students. And so the first thing we have that we do, and we do these kind of on a loop, 3 days a week, we read, and we do our kind of our literature together. I didn't want an intense literature program this year because my girls, we're coming from K-12, and our school was such that I taught everything. They sent us the materials, and I taught all of the things. They weren't taught by an online teacher or anything like that, but the K-12 curriculum itself was very overwhelming, and it wasn't a good fit for us. And so we're kind of getting back to that, trying to find that we love school again, and to get on a good place where we need to be with more of like reading and writing. So I didn't want a super intense literature program, but I did want them to be getting literature into them because I feel that's very important. So what we decided this year was that we would read some good classic literature. So right now we are reading The Secret Garden. I was able to find a set of, I believe it was 16 of these, and you can see they're not very thick, from Costco. And so they just had good classics in them, like Call of the Wild, The Secret Garden, Alice in Wonderland, The Jungle Book, a bunch of things like that. And they're not very long. So we're reading a chapter of this every other day. And that's just to kind of get them acquainted, especially my son, with some of the stories he hasn't heard yet. And get them listening to some good literature and not be overwhelmed by a super intense literature program. We are also reading a biography. When we read our literature, that same day we are reading a biography. And right now we are reading Who Was Queen Victoria. I really, my oldest daughter is really intrigued by history, and I feel it's really important to know who some of these famous people are. And I don't think that all kids, at least locally to me, know who some of these people are. And so my intent for this year and probably next year is to spend time with reading some of these Who Was books every month in our morning basket. So for right now, we're reading Queen Victoria. And why I chose both of those was based on the thing that we're doing the other 2 days. We're doing that usually Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we are doing Story of the World, Volume 4. And so right now it started when Queen Victoria was becoming queen, and so that's why we chose our biography, as well as The Secret Garden taking place in England around this time period. And so we chose that. But I chose Story of the World because it is written, for anybody who's not used it before, it is written much in story form. And so it's something that really captures my kids' attention. They get very bored with listening to a dry history lesson, but for this, they enjoyed it very much. Now, my kids were all at different points in knowing history because they have been using the K-12 curriculum, which left them off at different points. This kind of would have been the place that my fourth grader would have been going to. My kindergartner, he's going to be going through history repeatedly. It didn't really, I felt, matter where it started. And my second grader, she did finish things up like ancient Egypt and things like that last year. And when I sat down and talked to them and asked them where they wanted to start, they were very interested in more of like the more recent wars and different things that were taking place in the past 100 years or so. And so we decided, since our goal was to fall in love with learning again, that this would be where we started. So we did go ahead and start with this. Now, when we are reading the biographies and the literature, my girls, well, and my son too, but he doesn't have this one, they have got a coloring book, and I actually think that we picked this one up from the dollar store. But you can see it just has patterns in it. And so they spend time kind of coloring this. As long as they are listening and can answer the questions that I ask them during or after, then I'm okay with them coloring. So my son has Paw Patrol and my 3-year-old, and my bigger girls have this, and that's part of what we've considered their art curriculum this year. We will be doing different crafts and some things like that, but their K-12 had a very, very intense art program, to the point that I almost didn't pass the test as an adult after teaching the lessons. And so I wanted them to get back to the fun of art class. And so this is what we chose to do this year. And they're doing it, like I said, or 3 days a week when we do our literature and our biography. And then on the other 2 days a week, I went on and I printed, I ordered and printed, they have on their site separately, the coloring pages for volume 4. Now, if you go on to like Rainbow Resource or something like that, you can, the coloring pages are in the activity book for 1 through 3. However, for volume 4, for whatever reason, they did not include them. They didn't originally have them in there. But if you go on, what is it called? The Well-Trained Child, I believe, website, where Story of the World, or Well-Trained Mind, it's right here, I'm sorry, was where it's originally from and published, then they have the option to order these, and you can see them. And it was actually a downloadable PDF, so I was able to download them, and I had to only order it once. I didn't have to make copies, and I could just print 4 sets of them, because you can print as long as it's within your own family. So since I have 4 kids, I'm able to go ahead and use them, and then I should be able to use them down the road again for my own children if we go ahead and go through all of the volumes again. So they're able on history days to go ahead and work on coloring those. Now we do, like I said, we do the literature and the biography Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and we do history Tuesdays and Thursdays. The rest, the one thing we do every day is we work on these CDs. And these are some CDs I just pulled out. I actually had it stuck away, but we didn't use a whole lot. My kids are big CD fans. They have their own CD players. It's like a step back in time, and they play CDs a lot. But these were not ones that got played super often, and it's not because my kids didn't like the music. They just didn't pick them up for whatever reason. They have a lot of CDs, probably more than I did as a kid, and these weren't ones that they were necessarily acquainted with. Our church does not use a whole lot of old-time little kid songs, like I'm trying to look on here, Arky Arky, the Bible, stuff like that. They just don't use it. They have a lot of great programs, so I'm very happy with that, but they don't use these songs, and that's something that I wanted my kids to learn. So we decided that we would go through 1 or 2 songs, maybe 3. We actually did 3 or 4, I think, this week. And they just get learning some of this music, and that will be inquired as part of their music, as well as memorization, memorizing the songs. And so we do this every day. It's kind of a nice breakup. We do our reading, whether it be the biography and the literature or the history, and then we take a break and we play a couple songs, and they can get up and they can dance and they can sing, especially for my 5-year-old. This is his first time really having to sit for very long and actually listen. As well as the fact that he's a boy and my other 2 are girls. And so keeping him still for that long of a period is a little bit difficult. And so when he can get a break and get up and move around for a few minutes, it works really well. So we do that. And then the other things we do on a loop. And for anybody who's not familiar with a loop, it just means that one day you do this thing, and the next day you move to the next thing, and the next day, it doesn't necessarily have to be on Monday you do this, and on Tuesday you do this, and on Wednesday you do this. You just kind of line up the things you want to do, and whatever you did yesterday, you do the next thing on the list the next day. So right now, we are doing 1 day a week. We are doing a different devotion. They each have a little bit of a Bible program they are doing on their own, but we will also do this 1 day a week. And see if I can pick this open. It just has, you can see a lesson and a nice big picture, which they enjoy, the illustrations. And then it has talking about like connection and how it connects to you, and then we can always end. There's a prayer down here that has to deal with whatever the story itself was about. And there's some connection questions, like I said. And then there's something up here they can do, like a drawing or an activity of some kind. So if we have time, we can fit that in. And if we don't, it's okay with me. But I like to be able to do it and sit down and really connect with them about the story and ask them the questions. And so we make sure that we fit that in one time a week. We don't necessarily do things in a certain order. I do them based on how early we're up for the day. We like to start school between 7:45 and 8 o'clock in the morning. We are early people. We are usually all out of bed between 6 and 6:30. But when we have that morning where, actually today was one of those days where we didn't get started till about 8:15. So I wanted whatever was the quickest so that we could kind of move on to our individual time and not be too far behind in our overall schedule for the day. I'm not super stringent on a schedule by any means, but that's kind of how we decide. Like if we start at 7:45, that is probably going to be the day that we make sure we go ahead and do our devotion, because it doesn't take very long. On the other hand, if we start at 8:30, like we did today, then we will do something like this, where we work on our poetry. I'll be honest, as a homeschool mom, I'm not a fan of poetry. I wasn't a fan of poetry when I was in school. Poetry is not my thing. And again, we're back to that finding a love for school again, which was important to me. So I remember that I loved these Shel Silverstein books when I was a kid. And I had happened to pick this up last year when it was on sale, super cheap, because I saw it and it was nostalgia for me. I thought that someday that I would like to read this to my kiddos. And so this year I remembered I had it, and we pulled it out, and we decided that since we're doing most of our literature based on both biographies and classic literature, and we're just reading it this year, that we would incorporate a little bit of poetry every week by reading a couple poems out of here and talking about them. They're a little more silly for anybody who is not familiar with his books. He's got a few, but I really enjoyed them when I was in elementary school, and so far my kids are really enjoying it. And they are, for the most part, very short and sweet, you can see, and they have illustrations with them. And so if we get a late start, then that's the day that I would do something like this. So we do that one day a week. And then another day of the week, we are working on some character training. We all know what it's like to have kids, and one of the important things for us is to have them be people of good character. And having 4 kids, some of the things that are difficult in my house are tattling. And so that's the book we did this week. These are a children's book about, and then there's many different titles, and it's by Joy Berry. And I'm not sure who I got these from. I got these I think from my stepmom, actually. She has kids at home, and she was kind of past using them. My youngest sister is a year older than my oldest daughter, and so once she got past kind of using them, she had read them to her kids, or they were no longer using them, they refused to read them because they're getting older, she went ahead and passed them to me. And so they've been sitting here, and I thought, what a great way to work on character. My son actually begged me to read this to him again separately today, so they really do enjoy them. They're cute little stories, and they're pretty short, and so we've been working on one of these a week. And then we have chose not to do a foreign language right now. Someday we may venture into Spanish. My husband would really enjoy learning maybe Italian with us all too, because his family roots are from England and Italy. So we've discussed that, but for right now, something that is near and dear to my heart is sign language. So I did take some signing in college. And then I had a good friend that I worked with when I was a college student, actually, at a local restaurant. I was a waitress, and so was she, and her brother became a busboy there, and he was deaf. And so it became very important to me to learn how to communicate with him without making him always read my lips or writing it down. So I learned how to do a little bit of sign language, and it's always been a passion of mine. I'm not an interpreter or translator or anything like that. I'm not super great at it. I have stopped in the store and helped people out sometimes because they're trying to communicate with clerks or whatnot, and it was nice because I did have some deaf customers that came in that I learned to be able to communicate with better too then. So But it was something that was dear to my heart, and my oldest daughter specifically really likes it. And so we've been working on learning that one day a week based on my previous knowledge, as well as we found some videos on YouTube that teach it. And so we're pulling those up once a week. Now on weeks that we have, now you'll see we have more time, we will try and fit this in more, we will have, on weeks that we have more time than that, we will try and fit this in more than one day a week if we can, but we don't always have time in the mornings. We usually have one morning, it seems, that things just don't quite go right, and so fitting an extra in just doesn't happen. And for our last loop thing, and this is more, I can't even say this is part of the loop because this is when we have time, we want to discuss some of the presidents. We are probably going to actually do this a little more towards the holidays or weeks when we're not doing as much work. There are certain weeks that we will be doing a little less work just because we'll have some family things going on, and my kids really are interested in learning about the presidents, and so we got some of the workbooks for my older two, and we're just going to simply discuss some of the key things about them. Let's see if I can open them up here. We did start on Monday, but Monday we spent our extra time doing like beginning of the school year stuff, and so we didn't do this. This is the one thing that got skipped. And so they just have a picture of the president, and on the back it talks about, it's kind of hard to see, I guess, talks about things like where they were born, what party they were affiliated to, when they died, their religion if they had one, those types of things. So this obviously being 36 flashcards does not, I believe, have everybody in it, but it does have a large portion of them. And so I thought that, again, getting back to that, just knowing who people were, exposing them to that, there's no real in-depth study on it. It's just a brief overview that we're going to talk about. And so that is what is in our morning basket right now. I expect it to stay mostly the same. The books here will change. Our biography and our literature will change, but it will stay virtually the same for the whole year. Being homeschool moms, I'm sure you know that sometimes things don't go as planned. So if you guys are interested in seeing what biographies and literature and whatnot we are doing, drop a comment down below, and I would be happy to show you guys that in separate videos each month, the different character books and whatnot. We will be doing at least 4 character books a month, so I'd be happy to show you which character books we're doing, and that we'll be doing multiple biographies. I intend to probably do 2 biographies and 2 literature books at least a month, so I will be happy to drop those in a separate video if you are interested. So for those of you who have been hanging out with us, thank you so much, and if this was your first time here, thank you so much for joining us this time, and we will see you next time. Bye.